This material that John Harvey had woven of silk and worsted goes back to the cloth the strangers introduced and became known as shawling. And it's like cashmere. And so it was the chosen material for the shawls to be made of. And if you feel it, one of these shawls, as long as it hasn't been washed, which some of them have, sadly, then you get an idea of the quality of the cloth. And so this was the beginning of the successful 5 companies that survived, really. They went into the shawl business in a big way. And the shawls, these beautiful Indian shawls, had been coming to Europe during the 18th century, but because they were very colourful, they weren't particularly absorbed into the fashions of the time. But at the end of the 18th century, in the French Revolution, then anybody who wore rich clothes was immediately hauled away. So women went into wearing very thin, scanty cotton gowns, and they needed a shawl. And the French court made them very popular. It said that the Empress Josephine had 20, and as they cost the same as a small house, they were rather expensive. And of course, what the rich have, the rest want. And that's where Norwich was ahead of the game, because they had this shawling that was ideal for making the shawls. And so from the end of the 18th century, as the fashion grew, they were right there up front. First of all, they were embroidered. And there's a letter in the archives where a lady was visiting a house in Magdalen Street, and she saw 4 girls sitting round a table embroidering, and they were making a shawl. And anybody who knows about needlework, there's a shawl in the collection of the museum where you can distinctly see there's a different hand has worked on the borders that went round the shawl, the little square shawl. I maintain that the shawls coming from cashmere had status, and that's what they were for the cashmere princes and nobles who wore them. They wore several at a time on their head, round their neck, round their waist, everywhere, to show how wealthy they were. And of course that status appears to have carried on into the shawl-wearing fashion of this country, because you have a lot in literature of references to people who talk about how important it made a lady feel when she was wearing a shawl. And of course, because Norwich had this long history of quality, then to have a Norwich shawl was very important.